I never thought I'd be one of those people. The ones you read about in anonymous Reddit posts or hear about from a friend of a friend. But here I am, writing my own story because, honestly, I don't know where else to turn. It started like any other day. My wife, Emma, was busy with work, and I was on my way to an early morning meeting. We had been together for almost 15 years, married for 10, and as far as I knew, we were happy. We had our ups and downs, like any couple, but I thought we were solid. She was my best friend. I trusted her completely. I don't know what led me to check her phone. Maybe it was some gut feeling I'd ignored for too long, or maybe it was just that I'd forgotten my own phone at home and needed hers to make a call. I reached for it, and just as I was about to unlock the screen, a message popped up. The message was from a name I didn't recognize. Daniel. It wasn't suspicious in and of itself. After all, Emma had plenty of friends and colleagues I hadn't met. But something about the message caught my eye. It was short and vague but unmistakably familiar. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. I stood there, frozen, staring at those words as if looking at them long enough would make them disappear. But they didn't. They stayed there, staring back at me, taunting me with a truth I didn't want to face. In a daze, I unlocked her phone and scrolled through their messages. My stomach dropped as I read through the texts. Dozens, if not hundreds, of messages filled with intimate details and confessions I never imagined coming from my wife. The affair hadn't just been a recent fling. From the timestamps, I could see that it had been going on for years. Years. All the times she had claimed to be working late or staying over with a friend were there in black and white, all lies to cover up time spent with him. My mind went blank. It was as if my whole reality had shifted in a single instant. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted, was living a life I had no part in. I felt like I didn't even know her anymore. But as painful as it was, I needed answers. I needed to understand why and how, and if there was anything I could have done differently. I needed to know if it was over or if she still saw him. But most of all, I needed to know who this Daniel was and why my wife thought she could build a life with both of us. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I started piecing things together: her patterns, her lies, even her new hobbies and sudden interest in working out. It was like I was solving a twisted puzzle I never signed up for. As the days passed, I couldn't help but notice the small details I had previously brushed aside. Her constant texting, the weekends she insisted on spending with friends, the secretive smiles when she thought I wasn't looking. And with each revelation, I felt my heart break a little more. In that week of silence, I became a stranger to myself. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think of anything but the betrayal. It was only a matter of time before I would have to confront her. Chapter 2, The Confrontation. After days of sleepless nights and unanswered questions, I decided I couldn't live with the silence anymore. I had to confront Emma. The waiting was suffocating, and every minute I spent pretending to live in our once happy home was tearing me apart. It was a Friday night. She came home late, just like she had 100 times before. But this time, I was ready. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of her text messages and photos I had printed out next to me, waiting for her to walk through the door. When she saw me, her face froze. She could tell something was wrong immediately. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling, a flicker of guilt flashing in her eyes. I was sure then that she knew I knew. "Sit down, Emma," I said quietly, motioning to the chair across from me. She hesitated but eventually took a seat, her eyes fixed on the table. I pushed the stack of messages towards her, not saying anything. I watched as she looked down and realized what they were. She flipped through the pages, her expression going from shock to horror, and finally, resignation. She didn't try to explain or justify it. She didn't even try to deny it. She just sat there, silent, staring at the evidence of her betrayal. How long? I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with regret, or at least something that looked like it. 4 years, she said, her voice shaking. It started as, I don't know. Something I didn't think would last. But it did. 4 years. The words felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else's story. 4 years, and you never thought to tell me? You never thought I deserved to know? I was scared, okay. She snapped, her composure cracking. I was scared you'd leave, that everything would fall apart. And by the time I realized how deep I was in, it was too late. I didn't know how to stop. The anger that had been building in me burst like a dam. So you thought lying to me, hiding this from me for years, was better? Did you really think you could have both of us forever? I felt the heat rising in my face, my voice shaking with each word. Did I mean so little to you? No. She cried, her eyes filling with tears. No, you meant everything to me. You still do. I laughed bitterly. I meant everything to you. Then explain how you could keep lying to my face, night after night, pretending like nothing was wrong. She was quiet, wiping at her tears. I wanted to hate her, but in that moment, I just felt empty. All the anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it left a gaping void in my chest, one that I didn't know how to fill. After a long silence, she spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to stay. I don't know why I did it, why I kept doing it. I don't have a good answer. Her words hung in the air, offering no closure, no reassurance. Just the bleak truth of what our marriage had become, a lie we had both lived for far too long. I stood up, unable to bear looking at her anymore. I need some time to think, I said quietly. I don't know what happens next, but I can't just pretend like this didn't happen. As I left the room, I felt her eyes on me, but I didn't look back. I needed space, time to process what I had just learned, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to figure out if there was any part of me that could still trust her. But deep down, I already knew the answer. Chapter 3, The Aftermath. The days after the confrontation felt like a blur. I stayed with a friend, trying to get my head around everything. Emma texted and called, leaving voicemails begging me to talk, to come home so we could work things out. But I ignored them. I wasn't ready to face her or what was left of our marriage. I needed to process, to wrap my head around how to move forward from something that felt so final. At first, I wanted to believe that maybe, somehow, this was a mistake. I thought about the good memories, the vacations, the late night talks, and how she'd been there for me during some of the hardest moments of my life. How could the woman I loved be capable of such a betrayal? Every memory now felt tainted, warped by the knowledge that while I was devoted to her, she was sharing parts of herself with someone else. Finally, after nearly a week of silence, I met with a therapist. I needed someone impartial, someone who could help me make sense of the chaos in my mind. Sitting in that office, under the soft glow of dimmed lights, I told the therapist everything. From the first suspicion, to the discovery, to Emma's hollow explanations. The therapist listened quietly, occasionally nodding, but mostly just letting me spill it all out. When I was done, she leaned forward and asked a question I hadn't dared to confront: what do you want to happen now? The simplicity of the question caught me off guard. It forced me to confront a truth I hadn't been ready to admit. Did I want to forgive her? Did I want to walk away? Or was I trapped, unable to do either? In that moment, I realized I had two choices. I could try to salvage what was left of our relationship, digging through the wreckage and somehow, piece by piece, rebuilding the trust she had shattered. Or, I could walk away and try to rebuild myself without her. The weight of either choice felt unbearable. That night, I returned to our house for the first time since I left. I walked in, feeling like a stranger in what had once been my home. The silence was suffocating, as if the walls themselves held onto the secrets that had torn us apart. Emma was sitting on the couch, her face pale and drawn. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with something that might have been hope, though it was hard to tell. We sat in silence for a moment before she spoke. "I don't know what to say. I know I've hurt you, I know I've ruined everything, but I need you to know that I am so sorry. If I could go back, if I could take it all back, I would." I didn't respond right away. I wanted to believe her. Some part of me, the part that still loved her, wanted to believe she meant it. But another part, a darker, more wounded part, couldn't ignore the fact that if I hadn't discovered the truth, she likely would still be lying to me. "I'm not sure if that's enough, Emma," I finally said. "I don't know if sorry can fix this. You've been lying to me for years. And if I hadn't found out, would you have ever stopped? Would you have ever told me the truth?" She looked away, her expression faltering. "I don't know. I honestly don't know. I wish I could say yes, that I would have stopped, but I didn't want to lose you." It was such a twisted irony. She hadn't wanted to lose me, yet she'd done the very thing that made it impossible for me to stay. We sat there, the weight of the silence crushing any hope of resolution. It felt like I was staring into the broken pieces of something we could never put back together. That night, I slept in the guest room, both of us under the same roof yet miles apart. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words, trying to imagine a life where I could forgive her. But every time I tried, I remembered the texts, the lies, the betrayal, and any hope of forgiveness slipped further out of reach. By morning, I had made my decision. I couldn't keep lying to myself. This was beyond repair. It wasn't just the affair, it was the years of deceit, the trust she had shattered without a second thought. I realized that I had to choose myself for once, to let go of the life I had imagined and face the reality of what was left. I packed a bag and left the house quietly, without a word. There was nothing left to say. Chapter 4, Starting Over. Leaving the house felt like stepping into an unfamiliar world, one where I had to figure out who I was without Emma. The freedom of choice was bittersweet. I was finally breaking away from the ties that had bound me to a life filled with betrayal, yet I felt the weight of uncertainty settle heavily on my shoulders. I moved into a small apartment, a stark contrast to the spacious home Emma and I had built together. This new place was minimalistic and bare, just 4 walls and a roof over my head. At first, it felt lonely. The silence echoed through the empty rooms, and I could almost hear the memories of laughter and shared dreams bouncing off the walls, reminding me of what I had lost. In those first few weeks, I threw myself into work. I buried my pain in projects, meetings, and deadlines. My colleagues noticed I was distant, but I shrugged off their concerns. I wasn't ready to share my story with anyone, not yet. I didn't want pity, I wanted to heal in my own way, at my own pace. But beneath the surface, the pain lingered. I spent countless nights replaying memories of Emma and questioning every moment we had shared. I would sometimes find myself wondering if the entire relationship had been a lie, if the love we shared had ever been real. Those thoughts were like a fog, obscuring my vision of a future that felt less and less certain. Eventually, I reached a breaking point. I couldn't avoid the truth any longer, I needed to confront my feelings head-on. I sought out a support group for those who had experienced infidelity. Walking into that room felt intimidating, like stepping into the lion's den. But as I sat down among strangers who had faced their own betrayals, I realized I wasn't alone. Each person shared their story, their pain, and the varying paths they had taken to move forward. Listening to their struggles made mine feel a little less heavy. One night, I found myself sharing my story, hesitating at first, but then the words poured out. My wife cheated on me for years, I admitted, my voice trembling. I thought I knew her, but I feel like I've lost everything. I saw nods of understanding around the room, faces reflecting pain and empathy. It was liberating to share my truth, to let others in on my struggle, and slowly, I began to feel a flicker of hope. As weeks turned into months, I focused on rebuilding myself. I started exercising regularly, something I had neglected while I was with Emma. Running became my escape, it cleared my mind and allowed me to process my emotions without distraction. I took up hobbies I had always wanted to try but had put aside: photography, cooking, even painting. Each brush stroke and every snapshot felt like reclaiming parts of myself that I had lost in the shadows of our marriage. Despite my progress, Emma's presence loomed large in my thoughts. She reached out occasionally, sending texts filled with apologies and updates about her own attempts at counseling. I read her messages but rarely responded. I didn't want to reopen old wounds or risk falling back into the familiar patterns of pain and heartbreak. I knew I had to keep moving forward, and that meant leaving the past behind. One evening, I received a message that changed everything. Emma asked if we could meet for coffee, just to talk. My heart raced as I contemplated the request. Part of me felt a pull to hear her out, to understand her perspective, while another part screamed to stay away. After much deliberation, I decided I owed it to myself to at least hear her out. The next day, I walked into the cafe, feeling both anxious and resolved. Emma was already there, sitting at a table in the corner, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. She looked different, worn, but somehow more at peace. As I approached, I noticed a hint of vulnerability in her eyes that made my heart ache. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know this is hard for you, and I'm grateful you're willing to talk." I nodded, not sure what to say. We ordered our drinks in silence, and for a moment, I was flooded with memories: the laughter, the inside jokes, the moments that once felt sacred. But they felt distant, like fragments of a dream. After a few awkward moments, she spoke again, her voice trembling. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since you left. I've been in therapy, and I realize how selfish I was. I never considered how my actions affected you. I destroyed your trust and our future, and I'm so sorry." I felt a surge of anger rise within me, but I pushed it down. "You hurt me, Emma. You betrayed my trust in a way that I never thought possible. I can't pretend that didn't happen." "I know," she replied, tears pooling in her eyes. "And I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know that I'm working on myself. I want to be a better person, not just for you but for me too." Her honesty struck me. As much as I wanted to resent her, I couldn't ignore the growth I saw in her. But that didn't mean I was ready to take her back. "I appreciate your honesty, but I need time to process all of this. I'm not the same person I was when we were together, and I don't know if I can ever be that person again." Emma nodded, understanding washing over her face. "I get that. I just wanted you to know I'm trying. I miss you, but I know it's not about what I want anymore. It's about what's best for you." As we talked, I felt the heaviness of my past lift slightly. This was a turning point for both of us, whether it led to reconciliation or a final goodbye. I realized that healing would take time apart, time to grieve the loss of what we once had, and time to rebuild as individuals. When we finally parted ways, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. I was still far from being whole, but I was learning to take it one day at a time, finding strength in the knowledge that I had survived the worst. No matter what happened next, I was reclaiming my life, piece by piece. Chapter 5: The Path to Healing. In the weeks that followed my meeting with Emma, I focused on myself more than ever. I started to build new routines, gradually filling my days with activities that brought me joy and purpose. I signed up for a photography class at a local community center, something I had always wanted to explore. There was something magical about capturing moments through a lens, and it allowed me to see beauty in the world again. During class, I met people from all walks of life, young students, retirees, and everyone in between. We bonded over our shared love of photography, and I found comfort in their stories. They had their own battles, their own heartaches, and their own paths to healing. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of community that I had missed in my previous life with Emma. One day, during a group outing to a nearby park, I captured a moment that stuck with me. A little girl, laughing as she chased a group of ducks, her carefree spirit infectious. I took a photo of her as she stumbled and fell, only to get back up, brush herself off, and continue chasing. That image resonated deeply within me, symbolizing resilience in the face of setbacks. It was a reminder that life goes on, even when we fall. As the months passed, I began to embrace the idea of moving forward without Emma. I started going out more, exploring the city on weekends, and rediscovering the things I loved. I visited art galleries, tried new restaurants, and even started hiking on the weekends. Each adventure brought me a little closer to the person I wanted to become. But there were still moments of weakness. Times when I would hear a song that reminded me of her or walk by a cafe we used to frequent. I would feel a pang of longing, a brief flicker of hope that maybe things could go back to how they once were. I had to remind myself that those memories were tied to a different version of our relationship, one that had been irrevocably changed. Then, one evening, I received a message from Emma. It was simple, yet it made my heart race. "Can we meet again? I have something important to discuss." My stomach knotted with anxiety as I read her words. Part of me was terrified, and another part was curious. What could she possibly want to say after all this time? After much contemplation, I agreed to meet her at the same cafe we had visited before. As I walked through the door, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. Emma was already seated at our usual table, her fingers nervously twisting a napkin. "Thanks for coming," she said, her eyes searching mine. "I've been doing a lot of thinking." I nodded, bracing myself for whatever was to come. "What's on your mind?" "I know I hurt you deeply, and I understand if you're still angry," she began, her voice trembling. "But I wanted to tell you that I've been seeing someone. A therapist, I mean. And I've been working on myself not just to fix our relationship, but to become a better person overall. I realized I had a lot of issues I needed to address." Her admission surprised me. I had expected more apologies, but this felt different. "That's good, Emma. I'm glad to hear you're taking steps for yourself. I've also been thinking about us," she continued, her gaze dropping. "I know you've been healing and finding yourself again, and I've realized how much I've taken for granted. I can't change what I did, but I want to rebuild trust, even if it's just as friends right now. I miss having you in my life." The air between us felt charged, and I took a moment to process her words. I missed her too, but it was complicated. "I've changed a lot since we last spoke," I said carefully. "I'm not sure if I can go back to how things were, or if I even want to." "I understand," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't want to push you. I just wanted you to know I'm willing to do whatever it takes to show you I'm serious about making amends." Her sincerity touched something deep within me, a flicker of the connection we once had. "It's going to take time, Emma. Rebuilding trust doesn't happen overnight, and I need to focus on myself first." "Of course," she nodded, her expression earnest. "I don't expect anything. I just want to be in your life in any way I can." As we talked, I felt a strange mixture of hope and apprehension. Maybe we could find a way to move forward, not as a couple but as two people who had loved each other deeply and were now trying to navigate the aftermath of betrayal. We agreed to take it slow, to check in with each other from time to time. It wasn't a promise of reconciliation, but rather a tentative step towards rebuilding a different kind of relationship. After that meeting, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I didn't know what the future held, but I was starting to believe that healing was possible. Life was unpredictable, and while I had suffered immense pain, I also discovered resilience and strength within myself that I never knew existed. As spring approached and flowers began to bloom, I realized that I was ready to embrace whatever came next. Whether it was reconnecting with Emma or continuing to explore my newfound independence, I was prepared to face it head on. I was learning to be kind to myself, to allow space for my emotions, and to trust that I could navigate this journey with grace. The path to healing wasn't linear, it had its ups and downs. But with each step I took, I felt a little more like myself, a little more whole. And that was enough for now. Chapter 6, Unraveling Threads. The weeks that followed our tentative agreement to reconnect felt like a delicate dance. Emma and I exchanged messages occasionally, checking in on each other's well-being. She shared snippets of her therapy journey, and I responded with updates on my photography and adventures in the city. Each interaction felt charged with unspoken emotions, a blend of nostalgia, hope, and lingering uncertainty. I continued to immerse myself in my hobbies, rediscovering a sense of joy in simple moments. One weekend, I decided to explore a nearby hiking trail, armed with my camera. The fresh air and stunning views of the landscape invigorated me, as if each step I took was shedding layers of the past. I spent hours capturing the beauty of nature, the way the sunlight danced through the leaves, the colors of wildflowers dotting the hillsides. As I climbed higher, I found a secluded spot overlooking the valley below. Sitting there, I felt a profound sense of peace. It struck me how much I had grown since leaving Emma. I was learning to appreciate my solitude, to find comfort in my own company. In that moment, I made a silent promise to myself: I would never again let someone else's choices define my worth or my happiness. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I took a moment to reflect on everything I had been through. Yes, there had been pain, betrayal, and heartbreak, but there was also resilience and the discovery of who I truly was. I was slowly stitching together the fragments of my identity, creating something beautiful and uniquely mine. Back home, I uploaded my photos from the hike and started editing them. I lost myself in the creative process, feeling a rush of satisfaction as I brought my vision to life. As I viewed the final images, I noticed how they told a story, a narrative of healing, of finding beauty in brokenness. The following week, Emma invited me to an art exhibit featuring local photographers. Part of me felt apprehensive, but I was curious about how she had been incorporating her therapy into her life. I decided to go, ready to embrace whatever emotions arose. The night of the exhibit was buzzing with energy. As I entered the gallery, I was enveloped by a whirlwind of colors and sounds. People mingled, laughter and conversation filling the air. When I spotted Emma, she was standing by a display, her eyes lit with excitement. "Hey! I'm so glad you made it," she exclaimed, her smile genuine and warm. "Thanks for inviting me," I replied, taking in her vibrant aura. She had always had a way of lighting up a room, and in that moment, it was comforting to see her looking happy. We wandered through the gallery together, discussing each piece, sharing thoughts about the artists and the emotions behind their work. I watched her interact with others, and a part of me marveled at how she had begun to find her footing again. The joy in her laughter felt infectious, and I found myself smiling more than I had in a long time. As we reached a wall adorned with breathtaking photographs, I was struck by one in particular. It depicted a sprawling landscape at sunrise, the light spilling over the horizon in brilliant hues of orange and gold. I couldn't help but feel a connection to it, the beauty of new beginnings, of hope on the horizon. That one's my favorite, Emma said, stepping closer to admire it. It feels so full of promise, doesn't it? It does, I agreed, my heart swelling with the realization that we were both on our own journeys toward healing. It's like a reminder that even after the darkest nights, there's always a chance for a fresh start. As the night wore on, we exchanged stories and laughter, and I felt a warmth growing between us. It was different this time, lighter, less fraught with tension. We weren't trying to rekindle what had been lost but rather forging a new connection grounded in honesty and respect. Eventually, we found ourselves at a quieter corner of the gallery, sipping wine and reminiscing about our early days together. There was a bittersweet nostalgia in the air, but it felt more like a gentle reflection than an ache. We were both evolving, and while our past still loomed over us, we were learning to navigate our present. I've been thinking a lot about what you said before, Emma began, her tone earnest. About wanting to be friends and taking it slow. I don't want to pressure you into anything, but I miss having you in my life. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. I miss you too, Emma. But I think it's important for us to understand that we're both still healing. This journey is going to take time. I know, she nodded, her eyes searching mine. And I'm willing to be patient. I want to be someone you can rely on again, even if it takes us a while to get there. That honesty struck a chord within me. I felt the pull of a connection that was both familiar and new. I couldn't deny the warmth that blossomed in my chest, a flicker of hope that perhaps there was a way forward for us, one built on honesty and understanding rather than deceit. As we left the gallery, the night air was crisp, and I felt invigorated by the experience. We walked side by side, our shoulders brushing against one another, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of comfort in her presence. With each step, I felt the threads of our relationship starting to unravel and weave into something different, something that could allow us to grow together without the weight of the past suffocating us. For the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of optimism. The path ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to embrace it. Together or apart, I was beginning to understand that healing was not a destination but a journey I was finally ready to embrace, no matter where it led. Chapter 7, Navigating New Waters. After the art exhibit, Emma and I fell into a comfortable routine of reconnecting. We met up regularly for coffee, shared stories about our lives, and spent afternoons exploring the city together. There was a sense of ease between us that had been absent for so long. It felt strange yet comforting to share laughter and joy with someone who had once caused me so much pain. One sunny Saturday, we decided to take a trip to a nearby botanical garden. As we walked among the vibrant flowers and lush greenery, I couldn't help but marvel at how far we had come. The air was fragrant with the scent of blooming roses, and the sun filtered through the leaves, casting playful shadows on the ground. It was a day that felt ripe with possibility. "Isn't it beautiful here?" Emma said, her eyes sparkling as she admired a cluster of sunflowers swaying gently in the breeze. "It really is," I agreed, feeling a warmth in my chest. "It's amazing how nature can be so healing." We strolled through the winding paths, stopping occasionally to take photos. Emma had brought her camera along, and we took turns capturing the beauty around us. Each click of the shutter felt like a step toward rebuilding our connection, a way to document this new chapter of our lives. As we settled on a bench surrounded by blooming azaleas, I glanced at her, a sense of calm washing over me. "I've been thinking about how much we've both changed," I said, breaking the comfortable silence. "It's like we're two different people now." Emma nodded, her expression contemplative. "I know what you mean. I've had to confront a lot of my own demons. I didn't realize how much I was hiding from myself. Therapy has been eye-opening." "I'm glad you're finding it helpful," I replied. "I've been working on my own self-reflection too. It's hard, but I think it's necessary for growth." She turned to me, her eyes serious. Do you think we can really be friends after everything? I paused, considering her question. It was a complicated situation, but I could feel the sincerity behind her words. I think it's possible. But it will take time, and we have to be honest with each other. We can't pretend everything is okay when it's not. Agreed, Emma said, her voice steady. I want to be open about my feelings. I miss the connection we had, but I also understand that we have to take it slow. As we talked, I felt the boundaries between us softening, creating a safe space for vulnerability. It was liberating to acknowledge our shared history without the weight of resentment clouding our conversations. For the first time, it felt like we were no longer defined by our past mistakes but rather by our willingness to grow. As the afternoon turned into evening, we found ourselves laughing over shared memories and silly anecdotes from our time together. It was as if we were rediscovering the joy of companionship, reminding ourselves of the bond that had initially brought us together. There was still an undercurrent of tension, an acknowledgement of our history, but it felt manageable, like a thread woven into the fabric of our renewed relationship. On the way back from the garden, we decided to grab dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant. The ambience was warm and inviting, with soft music playing in the background and the tantalizing aroma of garlic and herbs wafting through the air. We settled into a corner table, and as we ordered our food, I felt a sense of comfort wash over me. Over plates of pasta and glasses of wine, we shared stories about our childhoods, our dreams, and the little things that brought us joy. Emma spoke about her passion for cooking, how she had always found solace in the kitchen, experimenting with new recipes. In turn, I shared my excitement about my photography journey, discussing my plans to showcase my work at a local gallery. I'd love to come to your exhibit when you have it, Emma said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. I want to support you in every way I can. I smiled, appreciating her sincerity. I would love that. Your support means a lot to me. As the evening progressed, the conversation turned a bit more serious. Can I ask you something? Emma said hesitantly, fidgeting with her napkin. Of course, I replied, encouraging her to share whatever was on her mind. What do you think it will take for us to rebuild trust? She asked, her expression earnest. I took a moment to gather my thoughts. Trust is a fragile thing, Emma. It takes time and consistency to rebuild. We'll need to be transparent with each other, communicate openly, and hold ourselves accountable for our actions. She nodded, absorbing my words. I'm committed to doing that. I want to show you that I've changed. I believe you, I said, my heart racing slightly. But it's also important for me to set boundaries. I need to protect my heart while we navigate this. I understand, Emma replied, her voice steady. I'll respect whatever boundaries you need. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of laughter and conversation. As we walked out of the restaurant, I felt a renewed sense of hope. We were treading new waters, slowly navigating the complexities of our relationship while honoring the wounds of the past. It wasn't easy, but it felt worth it. After our dinner, we stood outside, the cool night air wrapping around us. Emma looked up at the stars, her expression thoughtful. I'm really grateful for this, she said softly. For the chance to reconnect. Me too, I replied, feeling a warmth in my chest. I never thought we'd get to this point after everything that happened. As we said our goodbyes, I felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension about what the future held for us. We were standing on the precipice of something new, a friendship that had the potential to grow into something deeper if we were willing to put in the work. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on our journey. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was learning to embrace the unknown. I was discovering a new sense of strength within myself, one that was rooted in honesty, resilience, and the willingness to forgive not just Emma but myself. And with that realization, I felt a glimmer of hope shining through the darkness. Perhaps, just perhaps, we could find our way back to each other, this time with a foundation built on trust and understanding. The future was unwritten, and I was ready to explore whatever chapters awaited us. Chapter 8, The Turning Point. The days turned into weeks, and Emma and I continued to build on our newfound connection. We explored the city together, finding joy in simple pleasures, visiting art galleries, trying new coffee shops, and attending local events. Each outing felt like a step further away from the hurt of the past and closer to a future I never thought possible. However, as we grew closer, I sensed an undercurrent of tension. I had established boundaries, but I also felt a lingering apprehension whenever the conversation turned toward our feelings. Emma was open about her journey and her desire to rebuild our relationship, yet I struggled to articulate my own emotions. I enjoyed her company and appreciated her efforts to change, but I couldn't shake the fear of repeating the past. One evening, while walking through a bustling street fair, I spotted a booth selling handmade pottery. The vibrant colors and intricate designs caught my eye, and I led Emma over to browse. We wandered through the various stalls, admiring the craftsmanship and sharing light-hearted banter. As I picked up a small, delicate bowl, I felt a sudden wave of nostalgia wash over me, reminding me of the times we had gone shopping together before everything fell apart. "Look at this one," I said, holding the bowl up to Emma. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" "It is." "You have a good eye," she replied, her smile genuine. "You always did love unique things." As we continued exploring, I noticed a shift in the atmosphere. Emma's laughter felt a little strained, and I could sense a tension building beneath the surface. It wasn't until we found a quiet corner of the fair, away from the noise, that I decided to address it. "Is everything okay?" I asked, concerned. "You seem a bit off tonight." Emma hesitated, her gaze drifting to the ground. "I guess I'm just feeling a little overwhelmed," she admitted. "I want things to be good between us, but sometimes I worry that I'm pushing too hard." Her honesty struck a chord within me. "I appreciate you saying that. I think we both need to be mindful of where we are emotionally. I enjoy spending time with you, but I still need space to process everything." "I completely understand," she replied, her eyes meeting mine. "I want to be patient. I don't want to rush anything. I just miss the intimacy we used to share." My heart raced at her words. There was a part of me that longed for that connection, but another part was terrified of what it would mean. "I miss it too, but we have to take our time," I said carefully. "We can't force something that isn't ready." She nodded, biting her lip in contemplation. "You're right. I don't want to ruin what we have now by pushing for something we're not ready for." As we stood in that quiet corner, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. We were navigating uncharted waters together, and the honesty between us felt like a lifeline. It was comforting to know we could have these conversations without fear of judgment or anger. As the night wore on, we continued to share our thoughts and feelings. The conversation flowed easily, and I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't expected. I talked about my struggles with trust and my fear of vulnerability. Emma listened intently, her expression empathetic. "I wish I could take away your pain," she said softly. "I never wanted to hurt you, and I'm sorry for everything." "I know," I replied, feeling the weight of her words. "But it's important for me to acknowledge that pain. It's part of my healing." We eventually left the fair, the night air cool and refreshing. As we walked, I felt a sense of clarity begin to form. I realized that while the path ahead was uncertain, there was strength in our honesty and willingness to communicate. Over the next few weeks, we continued to grow closer. Emma's efforts in therapy were evident. She was becoming more self-aware and compassionate, not only toward herself but also toward others. I admired her courage to confront her past and work toward a better future. One afternoon, as we sat in a park, Emma turned to me with a serious expression. "I've been thinking a lot about us," she began. "I don't want to put pressure on you, but I do want to be honest about my feelings." My heart raced. "Okay, what's on your mind?" "I want to explore the possibility of us being more than friends again," she said, her voice steady but soft. "But I don't want to rush it. I want to be sure we're both ready to take that step." I took a deep breath, weighing my own feelings. It was a tempting offer, and a part of me longed for that closeness, but another part of me hesitated. "I appreciate your honesty," I said carefully. "I'm still navigating my own emotions, and I want to make sure we're both in a good place before we take that leap." "I understand," she replied, her eyes searching mine. "I don't want to jeopardize the progress we've made. Let's take it slow and see where this journey leads us." With that agreement, a sense of relief washed over me. We were both committed to taking our time, allowing our relationship to unfold naturally without the pressure of expectations. It felt right, a balanced approach to navigating the complexities of our past and the potential for our future. As the summer progressed, we continued to meet regularly, savoring each moment together. We explored new cafes, visited art installations, and enjoyed lazy afternoons in the park. I found myself laughing more and feeling lighter, as if the shadows of our past were slowly being replaced by the warmth of the present. One weekend, I suggested we take a trip to the coast. I had discovered a beautiful beach about an hour away and thought it would be a perfect way to escape the city for a day. Emma eagerly agreed, and I could sense her excitement. The day of our trip dawned bright and clear. As we drove along the coastal road, the ocean sparkling in the sunlight, I felt a sense of freedom. We blasted music, singing along and laughing as the wind whipped through the open windows. When we arrived at the beach, the salty air enveloped us. We spent the day lounging on the sand, collecting seashells and splashing in the waves. It felt exhilarating to let go of our worries and simply enjoy each other's company. Later, as the sun began to set, casting a golden hue across the sky, we walked along the shoreline, the cool water lapping at our feet. I glanced at Emma, her hair catching the light, and felt a rush of affection. "Can you believe how far we've come?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. "It's incredible. I never thought we would be here again." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant shades of orange and pink, I took a moment to appreciate the beauty of the moment. We were standing at the edge of the ocean, a vast expanse of possibility stretching before us. In that moment, I realized that healing was not a linear journey but rather a tapestry of experiences, emotions, and connections. I felt hopeful for what lay ahead, ready to embrace whatever the future held for us. And as we walked hand in hand along the shore, I knew that whatever challenges we faced, we would face them together one step at a time. Chapter 9, The Depth of Emotion. The weeks following our trip to the beach were filled with a newfound sense of hope and connection. Emma and I continued to explore our relationship at a comfortable pace, delving deeper into our shared history while fostering new memories. The gentle rhythm of our interactions felt like a dance, each step carefully choreographed to honor our past while moving forward. One afternoon, we decided to visit a local farmer's market. The vibrant stalls overflowed with fresh produce, handmade goods, and the sweet aroma of baked treats. We meandered through the colorful booths, sampling local cheeses and picking out fruits for a picnic. The laughter and warmth of the community surrounding us added to the joy of the day. As we sat on a grassy hill with our picnic spread out before us, I couldn't help but feel grateful for this moment. The sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on our blanket. We shared stories, playful teasing, and the occasional comfortable silence, allowing the peacefulness of the day to wash over us. "I've been thinking about starting a new project," I mentioned, biting into a ripe peach. "Something that captures the essence of change and renewal. I want to explore how nature reflects that process." "That sounds amazing," Emma exclaimed, her eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. You have such a gift for storytelling through your photography. I can't wait to see what you create. Her support fueled my passion, and I began to share my vision with her. I want to document the changing seasons, how nature sheds its old leaves to make way for new growth. I think it parallels what we're going through. I love that idea, she replied, her expression thoughtful. It's like you're capturing the beauty of transformation. The conversation flowed easily, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of freedom in sharing my dreams. It felt natural to discuss my hopes and aspirations with her, and I began to realize just how much I had missed this kind of intimacy. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow around us, Emma's demeanor shifted slightly. She looked at me, her expression serious. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," I replied, my heart racing slightly. "Do you think we'll ever be able to fully trust each other again?" she asked, vulnerability etched in her voice. The weight of her question hung in the air. I took a deep breath, contemplating my answer. "I hope so. Trust takes time to rebuild, and we both have to be willing to work at it. I think the key is to be open and honest with each other, no matter how difficult the conversations might be." Emma nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "I want to do that. I want to prove to you that I've changed. I don't want to be the person who hurt you anymore." "I believe you," I said, my voice steady. "But it's important for me to take things one day at a time. I want to make sure we're both ready to fully embrace whatever comes next." "I understand," she said softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I just want you to know that I'm committed to this, to us. No matter how long it takes." Her words stirred something deep within me. I felt a rush of warmth, a mixture of affection and hope. We were slowly peeling back the layers of our past, revealing the rawness beneath. It was a tender moment, and I wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but I hesitated, unsure of how to navigate the emotional terrain we were treading. As the evening air cooled, we began to pack up our picnic, the conversation having deepened our connection in ways that felt both exhilarating and frightening. There was a palpable tension in the air, a mix of hope and vulnerability that made my heart race. Later that week, I received a message from Emma suggesting we attend a local poetry reading. "It could be a fun way to connect with creativity," she texted. Intrigued, I agreed. I had always appreciated the power of words, and the thought of experiencing that energy together excited me. The night of the reading, the cafe was alive with energy. Warm lights hung from the ceiling, casting a cozy glow over the crowd. We settled into a small table near the front, our anticipation mingling with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. As poets took the stage, sharing their stories and emotions through powerful verses, I found myself captivated not only by the words but by the way Emma's eyes sparkled with each line. There was something magical about witnessing her passion for art in this intimate setting. When it was Emma's turn to read, I could see the nervousness flickering in her eyes. "I wrote something recently," she whispered to me, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I think I want to share it." My heart swelled with pride as she stepped up to the microphone. The room fell silent, and I held my breath, eager to support her. Emma began to read, her voice steady but soft, sharing a heartfelt poem about healing and the power of love. As she spoke, I felt every word resonate within me. The vulnerability in her voice was palpable, and I could see the emotion etched across her face. It was as if she was baring her soul to everyone in the room, and I was reminded once again of the depth of her spirit. When she finished, the crowd erupted into applause, and I felt a surge of admiration. Emma returned to our table, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "I can't believe I did that," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. "You were incredible," I replied, my voice full of warmth. "I'm so proud of you." As the evening continued, I realized that Emma was embracing her creativity in ways I had never seen before. This newfound confidence inspired me, and I began to see her transformation not just as a personal journey but as an integral part of our shared story. As we left the cafe, the cool night air enveloped us. "Thank you for encouraging me to share," she said, her expression softening. It felt liberating. "I'm glad you did," I replied, the warmth of her presence beside me filling the space between us. "You have a beautiful voice, and I want to see you share it more." Walking down the quiet street, I felt a rush of excitement for what lay ahead. We were both learning to express ourselves authentically, to embrace our creativity and vulnerability. It was a thrilling realization that we could support one another in this way, allowing our shared passions to bridge the gap between us. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but think about the growth we had experienced together. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I felt a sense of clarity beginning to form. Trusting each other again would take time, but we were on the right path. As I drifted off to sleep, I allowed myself to dream of what could be a future built on honesty, creativity, and a love that could endure. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them, hand in hand with Emma.